Hello, I am Nate Richard. I am here with Academy Award nominee Tod Maitland. He is currently nominated for A Complete Unknown, which marks his 6th Academy Award nomination. How are we doing today?
We're doing great. Very good, thanks.
So, I did want to ask, just for people who don't really know, what exactly is sound mixing?
So I'm a production sound mixer. There are multiple elements, multiple people that work on sound on film. So I'm really the first boots on the ground. So everything you see in front of the camera or near the camera or the environment around the camera is what I record. So on this film, which is different than any other music-based film that I've done before, we did it entirely live. No playback track, no click track, no earwigs. We basically did not have a safety net, in any way. So everything we did was live on this film.
It really shows, just because the movie feels so authentic, even in just how it portrays Bob Dylan.
Yeah, it was like recording an album, honestly. Recording an album and a really complicated movie at the same time.
So we are going to play over some clips, and we'll be breaking down how you did it.
But shone that house in New Orleans, they call the rising sun.
The reason I chose that clip is because it shows a lot of the different textures of sound that we went after. So anytime that you see the practical period microphones in front of the actors for any of the performance pieces, we chose 42 different microphones. So we sourced them out, we tested them, we have them in chronological order, and we wanted to use different microphones in each different venue to create a little bit of different texture, sound texture in each venue. So for anytime you see a microphone like that, I'm playing it, obviously recording those microphones, then I'm feeding those into a speaker, a monitor speaker for the actor on stage so they can hear themselves, and then another speaker to the audience. And then I have multiple microphones in the audience. I have a microphone that's on that speaker. I have Joan wired with a lavalier, and I also have a boom over her at the same time, so that when she pushes that microphone away, so you hear her through the PA system and singing normally as she would be in a club, and then she pushes the microphone away and goes a cappella. So now you hear a totally different sound with her.
I'm going back.
And then after she exits, the crowd applauds, and then the MC goes out. He again is back over the amplified system again, and then you have that little piece of dialogue with Pete, Joan, and Bob.
Thanks, Pete.
Hey, this is my friend Bob.
Oh,
Nice work.
thanks.
And all of that is recorded as a normal film sound would be. That's the sound that we're used to hearing on a film. So the idea was to create all these different layers of sound within each one of these moments, and that one was a good example for that.
How do you hide that equipment on set, though? Because the whole movie, it feels like a concert. It feels like you're actually there, and it's so sprawling.
That's a very good point, because we actually filmed it as if it were a concert, and I'll tell you how we did the last scene of the movie later on. And that was truly a concert. But yeah, the whole goal was to really make this as real and raw and natural as possible, which meant letting everything go, letting everything happen as if it would normally happen, and not controlling it like you would normally do on a film. So one of the things I always try to do for post-production is to give them as many individual sound pieces as possible, meaning like dialogue separate from audience clapping, separate from somebody speaking over the microphone and all of that. But on this film, we let everything happen at the same time. I kind of liken it to an artist with a palette. If you have, all of your individual colors on a palette, you can kind of paint whatever you want. On this one, those colors are kind of muted because everything's happening at the same time. So it made it definitely more challenging for post-production, because they had to go back now and kind of pull things out. But the way Jim and I talked about it from the very beginning was we needed to let this thing go, and we couldn't stop. We actually tried one one take we tried in one of the Newport scenes where we stopped the music to catch some of the dialogue in the wings, and the scene just fell flat. So from that moment on, we never went to like your standard, get quiet, get the dialogue piece, bring the music back in kind of situation.
I do wonder, this has been on my mind, how do you find all of those mics? Because you just said there was 42, you said?
42, yes. We had a great prop master, and Joshua Lutz, who has a company that has a tremendous amount of vintage microphones that are all in pristine shape. So we just kind of really went through a long process of sourcing them out, testing them, making sure everyone worked. Because microphones from that time period all have a very different sound. If you remember, particularly like the 50s and early 60s, they had a very mid-rangey sound to them. They didn't have that full, rich sound to them. And each year they got better and better and better. And then Neumann's came in to the studio microphones in probably the mid 60s, and they really changed the whole sound dynamic of recording mics.
So do we want to play the next clip?
Sure. What I really like about that piece are two things. One is it's one of the 3 or 4 times that you see New York. It's probably the quieter moment, but with moments of harried panic in it. It's that moment where people don't know if they're going to live the next day or not. And Bob decides the way he's going to deal with it is go play in this club. So as Joan comes out, we added it again, as much sound to the street as possible to help her feel like this panic, like this, the energy of what was happening at that moment. And right before that scene, we added Walter Cronkite, we added sirens, we added all these other components to it just to help build that energy. Where normally on set, you would never do that. But again, Jim's real goal was to just create as this thing as real as possible. So as she's walking down the street, you hear the cars, you hear the guy talking and all that. We have, again, microphones all over. I'm recording all the period cars, obviously recording the man in the phone booth. And then as she approaches, and the drummer, he's consistent, the Indian drummer is consistent on every street scene. You'll see him on every street scene. And then as you approach the gaslight, you start to hear Bob playing. So we play that in full perspective from outside. And then we have a microphone coming down the stairs just to get that entry feeling of going through that cavernous hallway. This is one of the scenes where there isn't a practical microphone. So there's no microphone in front of him, and there's no amplification in the gaslight. So early on during rehearsals, I was watching the way Timmy was playing, and he holds the guitar very similar to the way that Bob held the guitar. That would block any lavalier microphone, because normally you put a lavalier microphone on the breastplate right here. But that would be covered by the guitar. So I talked to Timmy early on and said, the only way I'm going to be able to do this is to mic you in your hair. And he was like, are you serious? And I'm like, yes. And then I had to finesse that with the hair department. And I think 14 times we went to that hair mic to do it. And it worked brilliantly, because if you think about it, it's like right here, aiming straight down, so going over his mouth, down towards the guitar. Then I would put a wireless microphone inside the guitar, which I put in there every time we used an acoustic guitar. I had a wireless mic inside the guitar, because they were obviously not plug-in mics of that, plug-in guitars at that time. And then multiple ambient mics within the gaslight to capture some depth of his singing and some of the audience and all of that. So it was, again, another texture, another, different kind of sound. And you hear the similar kind of sound when he plays for Woody Guthrie inside the hospital, when he plays at Pete's cabin, when he plays in his apartment. That's the style we use for this. So in what I do, microphone placement is really one of the most important things you can possibly do. I teach at NYU, and I always tell my students that you can have the best equipment in the world, but if the microphone's in the wrong place, it's going to sound like crap. If you have mediocre equipment and the microphone's in a good place, you're going to have a decent recording. So So again, so much of this was about figuring out, how to mic each one of these scenes and to keep it, coherent throughout the movie. If you think about it, you film a movie over 12 weeks, but you watch it in 2 hours. So we could be filming in 20 different acoustic environments where the sound of somebody's voice could be so drastically different from one to another. So the techniques of using microphones and having their voices sound similar throughout the entire movie is something that you learn as a production mixer. It's like, for instance, I'll get an actor's voice in my head and figure out what microphones I can use. If they're in a bathroom, I need to use a different microphone than I would if they were outside, or if they're in a car or in a club or whatever. So it's all about, figuring out and matching those voices to keep it really succinct throughout the whole movie.
Really curious, because this looked to be a tracking shot. Is that
steady cam, right?
Yeah. So how did you make it so Monica, since there's speakers all around, how did you make it so she could hear it even though she was, just outside? Because the transition from Masters of War is just so smooth, but it also feels just so immersive.
That was kind of the environment in Greenwich Village back then, because they had open doors and these small clubs were downstairs. So as you walk by on the street, we do another scene with Timmy in 1965 when he's walking down the street, and the street is much more alive at that point. New York City is really kind of blown open more. And you actually hear sound coming as you walk by these doorways. So for that scene, we would actually add speakers in and play different music coming from different doorways as Timmy walked by. And then in that scene also, they played Puff the Magic Dragon, the opera singer is playing, and all of that. And those are all real. Those are all live, all happening, while we did it. So again, just creating more sound to create that environment for the actors.
So he was singing even before we saw him.
Yes, he sang all the time. I mean, I give him tremendous credit. Because normally when you're not on camera, you wouldn't be singing. If the actors are doing a scene, so when we're in Newport and the actors are doing scenes in the wings, you would either play playback or you would do something, or you would have it more quiet. But Timmy played for every actor when he was off camera. He played during every single time. Whenever he had that guitar in his hand, he was constantly playing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, amazing job. He really, like I said, I give him a lot of credit, and for Jim, for going out on a limb like this, to do this film like this, because again, no safety net, no playback safety net, no click track, nothing. If we didn't get it, it wasn't going to be there. So it was a little bit of a risk for everybody. I think everybody's a little nervous about it in the beginning, but as soon as it all fell into place, it kind of just worked.
I think it really fits as well, because Bob Dylan is just such a unique artist.
Yeah, no, he was something else, and he had so many different voices also. So if you think about it, Bob was a known mutterer. In the movie, you hear it all the time. He's always muttering under his breath, and then he has his normal voice, like when you see him in the beginning of the film with Sylvie. That's his normal voice. And then he has the twang voice, which kind of develops more along, and he's got a regular level twangy voice, and then he's got this high sarcastic one. It's like, man, why do we do that? And it's just capturing these 4 different voices, and like I said before, trying to keep them in your head, and match them, from piece to piece to piece. Now you have 4 different voices instead of 1 to try to maneuver.
I also just got to credit Monica Barbaro. That voice is so distinct. I heard somewhere she didn't even know. Did she even sing? Have much experience before that?
Not at all. What she says is that she would sing in the shower, and that was it. And she learned to play guitar, and she's just obviously some people just they have it, and she has it. It's just there. None of us could do anything like that, or I couldn't. You might.
I couldn't. Right. Let's play the next clip.
Oh, God said to Abraham, kill me a son. Abe said, man, you must be putting me on. God said, no. Abe said, what?
We built that studio from the ground up. It was a stage. Francois, our production designer, and Regina did an amazing job putting it together. And Michael, our prop person, they just found all of this old equipment. And then we interfaced it and made everything work that needed to work, having communication between the control room and the live room.
61, take 7.
No, you can't look at me like that.
Having everything in the live room wired, every instrument, everything except for the drums. The drums we muted because drums can really kill you with beat and just staying offbeat like that. But just again, another area where you get, the feeling of these different layers of sound. You have inside the control room sound, you have inside the live room sound, you have him talking before they start playing. And then as soon as it all kicks into playing, it just goes right into, the song that we all know today, but nobody had ever heard before, this moment. And, all of us is just such a amazing challenge and rewarding, just, because there's so much more that goes into it, than what you see, on camera. Again, we probably had 20 microphones going, for this one scene, because you have the people talking in the control room, you have all the microphones in the studio, you have ambient mics, you have the talkback microphones so they communicate to each other. So all these components, and being able to set it up properly. Like Jim is just a really great, strong director and allows you the room to really do what you can do. And he does that with our post sound team also, who've worked with him a lot before. So he's just like, you just do everything you need to do. So we would come in, and wire the whole stage up beforehand, and then set up for these scenes, and then just go.
So how do you transition from just inside and outside that recording booth?
You play it by perspective. If you're in the control room, you're going to hear your actors talking as if they're there on a normal film, and then you're going to hear the music coming in through a playback speaker or a monitor speaker inside the control room. And then as soon as you're in the live room with Bob, then you're in with them. Now you're not listening to any amplified music. Now you're listening to it directly from him. So you're listening a lot more from his mic, a lot more directly from the other actors' instrument mics and all of that. So it's just, adding amplification inside when they're playing inside when your camera's inside the control room, and then going live when you're inside the live room.
Because you mentioned you worked on other music-based movies before, and this is a scene that we often see in these music movies is the recording studio. So how would you normally do that?
So if we wanted to record, going all the way back to The Doors, the first music movie that I did, Val Kilmer sang live for about 8 takes until his voice was just shot, because Jim Morrison's register is just so low and it was just so hard to get to. But Val was great. I mean, so most of the time you see Val in that movie, he's in close-up. When he's in close-up, he's singing live. So we would always shoot his close-ups first to capture that. So normally you would always have a playback track, which is a pre-record. So that means you go into the studio well before you start filming the movie. You lay down all the instrument tracks, you lay down all the vocal tracks, and then when we get on set, we have a playback person there. And if you're going to record live vocals, you'll never do live instruments. Live instruments, you'll deaden all of the instruments, and because you're just trying to capture the live vocal. It's really not about the instruments at that point. And you'll give all of the actors earpieces so that you don't want them playing, but you want them obviously totally in sync with the track. So if you give them all earpieces and now they're singing along with their pre-recorded track, this is what they do on every big musical that I've done. They do it on, on Greatest Showman, West Side Story, all of that. Because what it allows you in post-production is to be able to either go with the live track that I recorded on set, Or you can go to the playback track because they're singing right along with the playback track. So they're technically totally in sync with the track. And if they're good at it, it really looks very close to being real. I don't think anything is ever as good when it's real as then when it is real. But that's how you would normally do it. You'd always have that playback track going. You'd give them all earpieces and they would all be singing along to that playback track, allowing you later on to use either one in production. And if you do any big dance numbers, like any of the big musicals that you see, they may do live stuff, but they'll always go back to the vocal pre-records for the movie when they're doing any big dance kind of number.
You brought up West Side Story. That was just a movie I was just rewatching the other day, and I have a good speaker system, and just the sound in that movie is
Yeah, I mean, Steven's meticulous, and like I said, I love working with strong directors and ones that know exactly what they want, and obviously Steven is one of them, Jim is one of them, Oliver Stone. I'm getting the Cinema Audio Society Career Achievement Award February 22nd, and Oliver Stone's going to present it to me. I've done 6 movies with him. And again, these strong directors that really know what they want make our lives so much better. For me, some people are intimidated by it, but I love it.
So do we want to roll the next clip?
Sure.
I'm not the one you want, babe.
I'm not the one you need.
Before we start, I do want to ask now, because I'm just looking for the hair mic. Did you use that?
No hair mic there. No hair mic there because this was a performance piece in front of microphones.
Yeah.
So again, a different sound. That wasn't the sound that we're looking for. When we use the hair mic, we're going for more of a acoustic, non-performance type sound. And again, finding a way to be able to record him because there was no other way to record him. No, anytime that they're in front of microphones like that, that's where you have the microphone, the vocal guitar mic, you have speakers out to the audience, you have monitor speakers back to Joan and Bob, and then multiple audience microphones out, recording the audience out there, because the audience really does become a big character in the movie. And you see it, when he plays Times They Are Changing. And again, nobody had ever heard this song before, so it's the first time anybody ever hears it. But the audience starts picking up on the chorus, and they start chiming in with it. And then at the end of the film, when he goes electric, and the audience becomes entirely divided, some are for him, some are against him, and it gets chaotic. There the audience is a real big factor in it. And we had so many different microphones. Some were pointed on people so that we could get their individual reactions. Some were general ones. And, it was just a mix. And Jim is actually really good with background actors and really getting them to do what he wants. Because if you just tell them, you should be angry and you should be happy, it never works out that well. You really need to finesse them and bring them along a lot more. And one of the things on this one is working with the actors to get them in the right proximity to the microphone. So when you have 2 actors on one microphone, you have no way to balance them out. Obviously, if each one of them are on their own microphones, I can work the levels and balance them out. But now when you have 2 actors on one microphone, you need to figure out exactly where they should physically be in relation to that microphone. And Bob has a much more powerful voice than Joan.
Someone to open each and every door.
If they were equal distant, you would hear mainly just Bob. So we played with their distances to find really what worked perfectly to be able to get a really good duet performance. And they do another duet when he's in his apartment when they sing together, and that's another moment, but I was able to use multiple microphones on that so I could actually play with their balance a little bit better. But I had gone back and looked at the original Dylan and Joan singing that song at Newport, and they're both the same distance from the microphone, and you mainly just hear Bob. it's very hard to hear Joan during that piece. So we obviously wanted more of a balance between the two of them. So we played with that physical proximity to the microphones at the point.
What's the approach when doing it, in a big like outdoor setting like we just saw in that scene?
All of those were done just like a concert would be done, where I'm taking the inputs from the onstage microphones and then feeding them out through different speaker systems. One, like I said, going as monitor mixers so that Bob and Joan can hear it directly. And then other ones going out to the audience. And then the trick is kind of finding the balance, because I want to hear the audience a lot. I don't want the playback or the speaker sound overpowering the audience, but the audience also needs to hear enough level so they can get excited by it. So it's a lot about finding the balance and how it all works. And same thing with the monitor speakers that were going to Bob and Joan. If I played those too loud, I would hear them coming through their microphones. So you kind of just work through the balances and figure out which ones are going to be best. And then I have all these different tracks, and I make a lot of notes and I send them to post-production. So then post-production can really pull them apart later on and utilize whichever one they want a little bit more. Like if the camera comes in on one of the background people saying something, they'll go to that one microphone that I have that's closer to that actor. And one of the things also, Jim is very, very focused on sound, more so than almost any director. So one of the things that I do is, even if I have 40 microphones coming in, I'm always doing a single track mix. So that goes with dailies. And dailies are what you film. It's what you film. It's what the studio is going to see. It's what everybody is going to see as the next day. So once they sync up, film and sound together, if I just threw 40 microphones at them, it would sound like a mishmash. It would sound terrible. So I do a live mix as if we were, again, doing this thing totally live. I do a live mix and I put that on to the dailies track, and that one track stays with the film all the way through until post-production starts to pull it apart. So it's kind of what everybody sees and gets to know as the sound of the movie. And Jim wanted everyone in the studio and everyone that saw this in dailies to know what the energy was that we were creating on this film. So I would do these crazy mixes, and Jim would come over and say, let me just hear a little bit more guitar. Let me just hear a little bit more of this, and he was so in tune with it. And I just don't know where he has the bandwidth, because if you think about it, he's dealing with camera and wardrobe and background and, the actors, obviously, and everything else that goes into it. But he's also focusing on these little nuances of sound as we're going along, which I found incredible.
But with working with James Mangold, because you had worked with him before in other movies too, right?
No, I'm the only one in the sound team that had never worked with him before.
So how did you first come to meet him?
I think, it was through producers who I knew, and since I've done so many of these kind of music-based films before, I think I was an obvious choice to bring in. And again, being able to work with, these bigger directors and bigger actors and all of that, because it can be intimidating, it can be a rugged environment. So I think I was just kind of a natural choice for it. And I think, with my music background and that, it was, and such a complicated movie and I have all the equipment. I actually built a sound cart, a brand new sound cart from the ground up for West Side Story. Because West Side Story was basically like recording a Broadway musical on the streets of New York. So I have 40 channels of wireless. I have all sorts of different playback systems and everything else. And the great thing about technology now is everything is so much more compact than it used to be. Even though my sound card is large compared to most of them, it's nothing like what I had on the Doors. When I worked on the Doors, I was running 2-inch analog, sound and a 1-inch analog playback track. I had 8 carts of equipment, where now I can do it with 2, very well-equipped carts.
Are there any other scenes that we didn't just watch that were really that you're really most proud of that you've worked on?
Yeah, good question. So when you see the movie Newport 65, the night scene, when it starts off with the Texas gang chopping and goes all the way through until Bob walks off stage after singing Baby Blue, we shot that as one continuous scene. And again, Jim's goal was to create a live environment feel. So we had 3 cameras out in the audience, and we started rolling before the Texas gang came out. And it was one 23-minute take where we had everything going on. So when you see the film during that whole time period, you have all the people that are like Pete Seeger and everyone else who's part of the Newport group, and they're getting so upset the fact that Bob's going electric that they go try to stop it and all of that. So that all happened on this one giant take. So I have every actor on stage wired. I have obviously the whole stage wired. I have the audience mic'd. I have the speakers mic'd, guitar, everything else. And I think that's where I had 40 microphones out on that. And we just ran the entire scene from beginning to end as if it were a full concert. And again, no playback, no click track, no nothing. The MCs would come on in between. And it's all a balancing act. It's all trying to figure it all out. And you don't have that much time to do it because we're doing it all in real time when you're on a film set. And you don't get many rehearsals to kind of figure out, how everything's going to work. So that's where, I think I used everything I've learned in my 45 years on this movie, more so than probably any other movie. And I think one of the things that we were able to do is really, make sound a character in this movie, which is really a great goal, and it doesn't happen often.
So before I let you go, I do want to ask, after the award season, do you know what movie you're working on next?
I just finished the Bruce Springsteen movie, Deliver Me From Nowhere. That was pretty great because Bruce was on set every day. Every day he would just hang out on set, just like one of the guys. He'd be he'd be eating with us at catering. He'd be just hanging out and a real person, I mean, where Dylan really never was around at all for while we were filming.
Did you ever encounter Bob Dylan afterwards or anything?
Timmy never met Bob Dylan.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Jim Mangold met him, talked to him, and said, that Timmy would like to, meet with you. And Bob said, well, why would I want to do that? It's like, maybe because he's going to play you, but no, that's Bob. I think part of this movie is, the name of it, A Complete Unknown. You learn a little bit about him, but he's still, walk away from the movie, he's pretty much of an unknown. He's very, very hard, and I think to this day, he's continued that. So
I remember walking out, I was telling one of my colleagues, I'm like, it almost feels like an antithesis to a lot of these music biopics that we see, just because it still keeps him as an enigma. And I just love that.
I love the fact that you didn't try to figure him out, that it is really about a time period, the explosion of a time period and of a character. And just in relation to the Springsteen movie is actually a reverse. The Springsteen movie is a character that's already big, and now it's kind of more of an implosion where he goes in to write Nebraska, and it's more of an insular film in that way. So the two of them are actually very different, which is one of the things that I love about making films is that none of them are ever the same. Always different characters and such interesting people, I mean, where do you get to hang out, with, Springsteen and Timmy and Jim and you're there together, 12, 14 hours a day, every day in a small, very, compact environment. So it's really a pretty great opportunity, to be in that group and to be with these people. And from where I am doing location sound, I'm like right there. So I get to watch it in real life, watch it on my monitor, and I listen to every single word. So I always have a really good perception of how the film is going to turn out. And I knew A Complete Unknown was going to be pretty great. I did Joker also. And when I did Joker, I knew, And, you know, I mean, Joaquin killed it, and I knew the film, you know, just had what it took.
It was an absolute pleasure talking to you about A Complete Unknown, a movie that I believe is still in theaters right now. Now it's going on demand in a couple weeks, but just again, congratulations on the Academy Award nomination. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm like I said, I'm happier about this one, especially for me, you know, because on my end of it, you know, so it was so much more detailed than I think any other film that I've done. So very proud of it.